William was reborn as a miserable orphan, but a gorgeous undead woman took him in, two ghosts trained him, and together they turned him into the strongest hero in the world. It all starts with William, just an average guy living a low-key life in modern-day Japan. Then one day he dies, and suddenly wakes up in a completely different world. When he opens his eyes, he finds himself inside a ruined temple, surrounded by three undead beings. At first, panic takes over. He starts bawling, convinced he ended up straight in hell. But he quickly realizes these creatures have zero intention of hurting him. In fact, they take him in and raise him like family. Since William still has the mind of a grown adult from his past life, he picks up their language at an absurdly fast pace. One day, Mary, the female undead of the group, takes Will outside the temple for the first time and shows him the beautiful, untouched world around them. Will is moved to his core, feeling like this is a message from the gods. A second chance at life, a real shot to start over and live with purpose. Mary is a mummy priestess with unshakable faith, who treats him with the warmth of a real mother. The other two who help raise him are Augustus and Blood. Augustus, or just Gus, is a stern, sarcastic-to-the-bone ghost obsessed with money, but who used to be one of the greatest mages the world has ever seen. He's the one who teaches Will about the gods, the history of the world, and how to use magic through the words of creation. Blood, meanwhile, is a warrior skeleton with insane strength who becomes a father figure to Will. He trains him in combat and also teaches him how to grow into a person of integrity and honor. William grows up happy alongside this weird, secret-filled family, and even though he knows they're hiding a lot, he never pushes too hard. After all, he's hiding the truth about his past life too. After years of training, Blood and Gus finally decide he's ready for some real battle experience. Gus warns him to get ready to face off against Blood, who's way faster than he looks. Before Will can even respond, Blood's already attacking. Will barely dodges in time. Blood keeps the pressure on, but Will casts a haste spell to put some distance between them, conjures a puddle on the ground that sends Blood sliding hard. And before Blood can get back up, Will tries to bind him with a web spell. Except Blood slices through everything with a single strike and yanks Will's weapon clean out of his hands in the same swing. Outside of combat training, Mary also teaches Will practical stuff, how to handle everyday problems and survive on his own. One day, coming back from training, Will sees Mary heading into the Earth Goddess's shrine. He knows he shouldn't spy on her while she prays, but curiosity gets the better of him, and what he sees on the other side of the door leaves him in shock. Mary is on fire. He bolts toward her in a panic, grabs her, and tries to drag her out while screaming for help. His own arms start burning too, and he passes out soon after. When he wakes up, he's back in bed with Mary, Gus, and Blood by his side. Mary cries with relief, blaming herself for not noticing he was there, while Will apologizes for being too nosy. That's when Mary sadly explains the truth. The three of them used to be human, but when they died, the emotions they were carrying were so intense that their souls simply refused to move on. They struck a pact with the god of the undead to remain in this world as undead beings, and because of that choice, they became enemies of matter, the goddess of earth and life. That's why Mary gets consumed by flames every time she tries to pray to the goddess. And yet, she's never stopped praying, for longer than she can even remember. After hearing all that, Will asks Mary to let him pray alongside her, because he wants to understand what she feels during those prayers. 5 years pass since that whole ordeal, and Will is now 13 years old. He's been praying to the gods nonstop and even meditated in front of them for 5 days straight, without rest or food. Gus's lessons have gotten way harder, but Will keeps pushing himself to the limit so he doesn't fall behind. Blood doesn't ease up on the daily training either. Then, one day, Blood tests him by forcing him to fight an actual undead creature he captured. Will gets a little nervous, but takes the monster down with ease, landing a clean, decisive hit. Blood's surprised, and Will jokes that he must just be a natural-born genius. After thinking it over for a moment, Blood says he's probably ready for the real deal now. He takes Will to an abandoned city and explains that many years ago, the place used to be thriving, with humans and dwarves living together in harmony. But after a disaster wiped everything out, only undead monsters were left behind. Blood leads Will deep into a tunnel beneath the city, leaves him there alone, and tells him to survive and find the way out on his own. Before Will can even say anything, Blood snuffs out the light and vanishes. Will feels a knot of dread in his stomach, but pushes forward and conjures up some light with magic. He quickly runs into a group of undead skeletons and takes them down without much trouble. But when he turns a corner, he spots a much bigger undead skeleton carrying a spear. Will freezes for a second, but then asks himself what Blood would do in this situation. And the answer's obvious. Blood would never run from a fight. So Will charges in head-on. The enemy dodges and tries to cast a spell. Will's caught off guard, but instinct kicks in. He disrupts the magic right before slamming his sword into the skeleton's skull. His blade shatters on impact, but the hit's enough to finish it off. Afterward, Will grabs the enemy's spear and realizes it's a magic weapon, dwarf-made. As he keeps walking, he can sense the exit is close. But then he feels a presence behind him and turns around to find Gus. Will asks what he's doing there, but Gus doesn't answer. He just stares at him in silence. Right away, Will senses something is seriously wrong. He asks if this is some kind of lesson, but instead of answering, Gus suddenly summons a stone golem to attack him. Will reacts fast, backs off, and destroys the golem by skewering it with his spear. Then Gus starts hurling rocks at him. Will runs, dodging the attacks and smashing through the magical traps Gus keeps scattering in his path. But soon Gus starts firing off multiple spells at once, and Will just can't keep up anymore. He trips and falls, looking up just in time to see Gus winding up for another attack. In that moment, Will panics. He thinks this isn't how he wants to die, and definitely not at the hands of someone he considers his grandfather. He closes his eyes and decides that if there's no other way out, he'll have to kill Gus. He charges forward and thrusts the spear toward him, but stops just inches away. His hands start shaking, and he drops the weapon. Will then tells Gus, face to face, that he sees him as a grandfather and just wants to know why he wants him dead. With tears in his eyes, he says that if Gus genuinely wants to kill him, he's okay with that, because he'd rather die than hurt his own family. Will breaks down crying, but then Gus suddenly switches gears to something completely upbeat and says maybe he went a little overboard with the lesson. He tells Will he did great. Will feels a huge wave of relief realizing Gus wasn't actually trying to kill him, but deep down, he knows this wasn't just a lesson. Gus is clearly hiding something. Then Gus leads him out of the dungeon, and the two head back home. Will decides not to tell Mary or Blood anything about what happened. Later, Gus teaches Will how to properly examine his new spear. He discovers the weapon can glow whenever he wants, and that it can grow or shrink thanks to the magic engraved into it. After that, Will starts visiting the abandoned city's tunnels regularly. By this point, he's taking down the monsters there with barely any effort, and often picks up pieces of armor along the way. Gus also starts giving him way fewer tasks, figuring Will's already learned more than enough. Then, one night, Gus calls Will into his room and says something really strange. He says that before Will turns 15, Blood will probably challenge him to a real duel, and he wants Will to lose that duel, on purpose, without letting Blood catch on. Will's jaw drops and he asks why, and as always, Gus says it's a secret he can't reveal. That's the final straw for Will, and he says it flat out. If Gus won't explain the reason, then he's not going along with it. Over the following months, Will throws himself into brutal training until the day of the duel finally arrives. Blood's already waiting, and the fight kicks off the instant their swords are drawn. Blood comes at him with a flurry of fast, heavy strikes, and Will can barely do anything except block and hang on for dear life. He keeps getting pushed back, step after step, until suddenly he lunges forward, uses Blood's own sword to launch himself upward, and drives his blade into Blood's chest. Blood's totally caught off guard by the unexpected move, but quickly tosses Will aside and pins his sword between his ribs. Then he points another blade at him and forces him to admit defeat. Mary immediately rushes over to check on Will and chews Blood out, reminding him he promised never to use that rib-pinning sword move again. After that, the three of them sit down together, and Blood tells Will he fought well, even though he didn't win. Will thanks Mary and Blood and calls them Mom and Dad, which leaves both of them completely overwhelmed with emotion. Blood then says he doesn't have any more secret techniques to pass down, but he does have a gift, the purple sword, one of the most powerful demonic blades in existence. Will immediately points out that he didn't even win the duel. But Blood explains the weapon isn't a reward for winning. It's proof that Will is ready to stand on his own 2 feet. Blood explains the blade is called Vindalfur, a demonic sword feared even by the gods themselves. It's absurdly powerful and has the ability to restore the wielder's health every time it wounds an enemy. But there's a serious catch. The more someone relies on it, the more their own personal growth starts to stagnate. Will understands both the power and the danger of the sword and promises to use it carefully. After that, Mary and Blood finally decide to reveal the truth they've been hiding for years. In the past, the demon lords banded together to conquer the world. They were led by a cruel ruler known as the Supreme King, a monster capable of creating demonic soldiers and generals out of his own blood and flesh. He was the original owner of Vindalfur. He'd wound himself to build up an army, then kill his enemies, instantly healing thanks to the sword's power. With this terrifying combo, he conquered most of the continent, starting with the very ruined city near their home. When the continent was on the brink of total collapse, Gus, the legendary wandering mage, came up with a plan. Together with Blood, the famous warrior, and Mary, the priestess, he planned to sneak into the Supreme King's city and steal Vindalfur. Without the sword, the Supreme King would be massively weakened and could finally be taken down. But the plan fell apart. When they reached him, the Supreme King transformed into a gigantic demon, and his skill with the blade was so overwhelming that not even blood could land a hit. Even so, Gus and Mary somehow managed to seal the Supreme King away. That should have been the end of it. But then Stagnate, the god of the undead, showed up. He offered to wipe out every demon on the continent, on the condition that the three of them become his servants without hesitation. They accepted on the spot. Blood became a skeleton, Gus became a ghost, and Mary, a mummy. Stagnate kept his word and got rid of the demons. Except instead of actually destroying them, he turned them into undead, leaving the world frozen in a kind of lifeless stagnation. Blood explains that the three of them became top-tier undead and spent over 200 years guarding the Supreme King's seal. Until one day, a group of undead brought a human baby to the temple, intending to offer it to a dark god so the seal could be broken. Blood killed them, and while Gus wanted to leave the baby in the forest, Mary and Blood decided to keep him. That baby was Will. Mary hugs him tight and says she'll love him forever. And even Blood says Will turned out to be the best student anyone could ask for. Will gets confused because the two of them seem to be saying goodbye. And then the sky suddenly goes dark. Black clouds gather above, and Stagnate appears as an enormous, monstrous shadow. He demands that Blood and Mary hand over their souls, since they truly abandoned the duty they were sworn to. Will is crushed under the sheer pressure of the god's presence, and collapses to the ground in terror at the sight of Stagnate's nightmarish echo. That's when the earth splits open, and Gus appears in dramatic fashion. Before the god can act, Gus tells Will to get Mary and Blood somewhere safe while he handles Stagnate himself. All Will can do is stare in awe as Gus takes on an actual god, chaining him in place by firing off spell after spell at the same time. For a moment, it looks like Gus is actually winning. His attacks overwhelm Stagnate's echo and slam it back toward its own realm. Gus then walks over to Will and tells him it's okay, that he can relax. Will is completely shaken, but feels relieved seeing everyone still alive. But before he can even say a word, Gus suddenly lets out an awful sound and is sliced clean in half. Blood and Mary are taken down too. Then Stagnate appears behind them, mocking Gus for thinking a mere echo of a god could be beaten that easily. He tosses Gus aside and approaches Will, explaining that the three of them were his top servants. Once they stopped fully dedicating themselves to guarding the Supreme King's seal, he was free to claim their souls. He says that because of Will, their bond to that duty weakened, which made it easy to take Mary and Blood. Gus is still stubbornly holding on, but the other two are already within reach. Hearing this, Will collapses to his knees in despair. Stagnate then offers him a spot in his army, promising that if he joins, he can stay happy with his family forever. He gives Will until the next day to decide and disappears. Will is heartbroken. He carries the three of them back inside and finally understands what Gus had been trying to do all along. Gus had been trying to keep everyone bound to their duty, so Stagnate couldn't claim them. He did everything he possibly could, but in the end he couldn't bring himself to actually hurt Will because of it. Will blames himself for everything. He thinks he was selfish and that now the people who raised him are suffering because of him. He starts crying, feeling like in his past life he only ever disappointed his parents, and now in this life he's become the reason for his family's pain too. The next morning, he wakes up to find Mary, Blood, and Gus acting normal, trying to stop him from blaming himself. That's when Will finally tells them the truth, that he's someone reincarnated, and that no matter what life he lives, he feels like he's worthless trash. Mary is furious, smacks him hard enough to sting, and tells him to never talk about himself like that again. That slap of reality clears his head completely. Will gets up and declares he's going to protect all of them. He goes to the shrine, prays to the gods, and heads out to confront Stagnate, who's waiting for his answer. When Will stands before him, he looks the god dead in the eyes and says he'll never make a pact with him. He declares he's going to defeat him no matter what it takes. Stagnate finds that amusing and summons a massive army of undead to attack him. The monsters close in from every direction, but Will fights back with everything he's got. He cuts down several of them with his spear, binds others with magic, and uses haste spells to move so fast that even Stagnate is taken aback. Still, there are just too many enemies. Will takes hits during the fight, and eventually Stagnate calls off the attack. He tells Will he's genuinely impressive and once again offers him a spot as one of his generals, so he can stay with his family forever. Will looks shaken, and then Stagnate fills a chalice with his own blood and offers it to him. To everyone's shock, Will slowly walks toward him, staring at the cup. For a moment, it looks like he's about to accept the offer. But the next instant, he grabs Vindalfur and slashes Stagnate's arm. Magical thorns sprout from the blade and pin the god in place. Will attacks again, and the sword's power starts healing his wounds as he fights. But just before he can finish the battle, a snake suddenly wraps around his legs from behind and bites him. He tries to keep moving, but the venom, or the magic, takes over his body, and he collapses, unconscious. When he comes to, he finds himself in a calm, heavenly place that feels strangely familiar, even though he can't remember why. Then he turns and sees a stunning woman approaching. In that instant, he realizes who she is. Gracefeel, the goddess of light and rebirth, the one who guided him to this world from the very start. Gracefeel asks why he turned down Stagnate's offer. Will answers honestly. He says his past life was empty and miserable, and he doesn't want to go through that again. He wants to live this life to the fullest, and he believes life has meaning precisely because it ends. And more than anything, he wants to protect the family he loves. Gracefeel is deeply moved by his answer. Overcome with emotion, she grants him her blessing and tells him to rise, swear his vow, and walk by her side from now on. Will suddenly snaps back to consciousness in the middle of the battle, rips the snake off his body, kneels down, and offers up a prayer to Gracefeel. Stagnate laughs at the sight, figuring it doesn't mean anything. But then, a blue flame starts glowing around Will's body. That's the moment Stagnate realizes Will has received the blessing of the goddess of light and rebirth, and for the first time, he panics. Will stands up, sword in hand, and declares he's going to dedicate his entire life to serving his goddess, destroying evil, and saving those who suffer. Stagnate immediately orders his undead army to kill him, but Will swings his blade and unleashes a holy power called the Divine Torch, sending the undead peacefully into the afterlife. After that, he charges straight at Stagnate using his haste magic. But Stagnate quickly escapes by leaping away and hiding behind a dust spell. Will stays on alert, and then Gracefeel gives him a sign. He realizes Stagnate isn't focused on him anymore. He must have gone back to the temple to attack Mary and Blood. Will sprints back to the temple at full speed, hoping to get there in time to use Gracefeel's power and send his family back into the cycle of rebirth. When he arrives, he sees Gus chained up, Blood standing in front of Mary, and Stagnate closing in on them. Will pushes forward, but he knows he's too far away to make it in time. And then suddenly, a blinding light appears and shoves Stagnate back. Mater, the goddess of the earth, manifests to protect Mary, proving she'd forgiven her long ago. That opening is all Will needs. He immediately hits Mary and Blood with the Divine Torch, knowing Stagnate will try to stop them from being freed. Just as expected, Stagnate counters the holy attack with one of his own. Blood seizes the moment and strikes from behind. Stagnate dodges it, but before he can recover, Will comes flying in with his haste magic. Stagnate tries to cast another spell, but Gus shuts it down instantly. Will then drives his sword into Stagnate, pinning him to the wall. Combining the power of Vindalfur with Gracefeel's blessing, he unleashes one continuous barrage and destroys Stagnate once and for all. The moment the battle ends, Will collapses from exhaustion. Mary, Blood, and Gus rush over to him, asking if he's okay. Gus praises him, saying he's gotten way stronger than before. Everyone seems genuinely happy and relieved, and Gus even suggests they should celebrate that night. But when Mary and Blood try to stand up, they suddenly collapse again. Will asks what's going on, but the two of them already know. With Stagnate dead and their pact with him broken, they're about to die. Will is stunned and refuses to accept it. He says there has to be another way, but Mary and Blood gently tell him this isn't something to mourn. At long last, they'll get to return to the cycle of rebirth. Will starts crying because he can't bear the thought of losing them, but they remind him not to be selfish. They tell him the life ahead of him won't always be easy, but he needs to keep trying to live as a good, happy person, no matter what hardships come his way. As their souls slowly start to leave their undead bodies, Will gets to see what they looked like back when they were still alive. Then Gus comes back with an old bottle of liquor, and together they have one last celebration in honor of how far Will's come. After that, Mary and Blood pass on peacefully, and Will prays for them as Gracefeel guides their souls toward rebirth. The next day, Will buries them on top of a hill. As he says goodbye, he tells them he'll be heading out on a journey soon and promises to come back whenever he can. Gus then walks up behind him, and Will asks why he's still alive. Gus explains that since he never fully broke his pact, he's still got about 10 years left. Until then, he plans to keep guarding the Supreme King's seal, at least until Will gets strong enough to handle it on his own. After that, Gus tosses Will a bag full of treasure and tells him to use it however he wants, since Gus doesn't need it anymore. Will thanks him sincerely, knowing the money's going to help him a lot once he starts traveling. He goes back to his room one last time, changes clothes, packs up his things, and gets ready to leave the temple for good. Gus walks with him to the end of the road, where the two say their goodbyes. Before Will sets off, Gus tells him he needs a last name, so he names him William G. Mary Blood, in honor of the family that raised him. Will then sets out on his journey, making his way through the forest, fighting off monsters and living off the food he brought with him. For a good while, he doesn't run into any sign of other people, so when he finally spots what looks like a settlement, he gets excited. But once he gets inside, he realizes it's just another abandoned city. Standing by the riverbank, he prays to Gracefeel, asking that the wandering souls there be returned to the cycle of life. The next day, he follows the river through the forest, hoping it'll lead him to human civilization. As he walks, a wild boar suddenly bursts out of the bushes and charges at him. Will reacts fast and takes it down with a single hit, but then notices the animal had already been hit with an arrow. Someone else is nearby. Soon, the person who fired the arrow shows up. It's a man with a bow, and Will starts thinking about how to approach without things turning violent. Looking the guy over, he notices he seems to be an elf, so he greets him in Old Elvish. The archer is clearly caught off guard and lowers his weapon. He introduces himself as Meneldor and says the boar was supposed to be his catch. Still, he agrees to split the meat since Will was the one who actually finished it off, and the two of them butcher and cook the boar together. Before eating, Will says a prayer to the gods, and Meneldor responds with a wry smile, clearly not sharing the same faith. After the meal, Will asks for directions, claiming to be an adventurer who got lost in the southern ruins. Meneldor tells him there's a city further down the river. Will thanks him and asks if he can tag along, but Meneldor shuts that down immediately and warns him not to follow him. Then he uses fey magic to light his own path and vanishes into the forest. That night, Will sets up camp, eats dinner, and goes to sleep. While he's asleep, Gracefield appears in his dream and shows him a vision of Meneldor and his village under attack. Will wakes up instantly and follows Meneldor's trail to warn him. Eventually, he reaches a village and sees people going about their business normally, so it seems like the attack hasn't happened yet. But then he senses danger and quickly jumps in front of two men to shield them from incoming arrows. That's the moment he realizes the truth. Meneldor isn't the one in danger. He's the attacker. Meneldor fires more arrows at Will, but Will blocks them. The village guards sound the alarm, forcing Meneldor and the others with him to retreat. Will chases after them using haste magic, even as Meneldor uses fey spells to trip him up and scorch him. Still, Will pushes through. He catches up to Meneldor, lands a hard punch to the gut, and drops him. Then he binds the rest of the attackers with his web magic. When the villagers arrive, everyone starts arguing about what happened. One villager thanks Will for saving them and explains that the region is called Beastwoods, a place where a lot of the locals are outlaws. He says the attackers came from a nearby village, but the strange part is that the two villages were supposed to be on good terms. Later, the village chief arrives, thanks Will, and asks him to step in again if they're ever in danger in the future. He then orders the attackers to be interrogated to find out the reason behind the attack. By morning, the truth comes out. Meneldor's village had been destroyed by demons who took everything they had. With nothing left, they set out to raid nearby settlements just to survive. Meneldor says the attack was his idea and asks for all the blame to fall on him. Even with some reluctance, the village chief still orders Meneldor's execution. Will steps in before that can happen. He offers to pay for the damage caused by the attack using the money Gus gave him. He says his goddess teaches kindness, and he believes people deserve a chance to make things right. In the end, the village chief backs down. The attackers are set free, and the people from Meneldor's village who didn't take part in the attack are given shelter. After that, Will asks Meneldor to guide him to the demons hiding in his ruined village so he can take them down, as part of his duty as a follower of Gracefield. Meneldor calls him a naive idiot, but still thanks him and shows the way. With Meneldor's precise tracking and fey magic, they quickly reach the ruined, fog-covered village. Meneldor scouts ahead and discovers the demons are at the shrine performing a sacrifice. But once Will hears who exactly these enemies are, he decides they're not much of a threat. He sneaks into the shrine, kills one of the demons performing the ritual, binds the manticore with web magic, and kills the second demon too. After that, he finishes off the manticore. Meneldor jumps in, taking out the guards outside as soon as he realizes the enemies aren't all that powerful. When the fight's over, the two of them search the village for survivors, but don't find any. Will then prays for the dead, asking Gracefield to guide their souls to their next life. Meneldor thanks him and apologizes for underestimating him earlier, admitting he thought Will was just some rich kid showing off a divine blessing. Afterward, Meneldor takes Will to meet his adoptive grandmother, who became a powerful, high-ranking ghost. Will gets worried she might be dangerous, but she's completely in control of herself and has no intention of fighting. If anything, she immediately picks up on the fact that Meneldor's been acting up. Meneldor breaks down and admits he was frustrated because he couldn't save his people or protect the village. He says he feels pathetic and has lost the will to keep going. His grandmother comforts him and tells him he still has another shot at living right, especially now that he's met a priest like Will. She then gives Will information about a demon hideout somewhere in the forest. After saying what she needed to say, she passes on peacefully, of her own free will. After a while, the villagers return and find their homes in ruins. Later, Meneldor takes Will to a quiet spot and finally tells him his life story. He says he was born to an elven mother and a human father, which made him an outcast. When his mother died, the people around him treated him badly, so he left. After that, he became an adventurer. But things only got worse when one of his own party members betrayed him. Somehow, his path led him to that village where he met an older woman who helped him become a better person. But because his elven blood made him age slowly, he stayed young while she kept growing older, and that gap often left him feeling isolated. Right after opening up like that, Meneldor suddenly switches gears and asks Will, as a servant of Gracefield, to accept him under her blessing. Will's surprised by how quickly the conversation turned, but agrees anyway, and the two head back to join the celebration. Rebuilding starts the next day, but the village can't make real progress without supplies from Whitesail. When Will asks about the city, Meneldor can hardly believe how little he knows. He explains that Whitesail is the largest city in the southern Fertile Kingdom and has remained important ever since the war against the Supreme King 2 centuries ago. Will decides he wants to see it for himself, but first he plans to gather money from the surrounding ruins to support the rebuilding effort. On one of these runs, Will and Meneldor spot 2 travelers being chased by a giant ape-like beast. Will steps in to help, remembering Blood's lesson. Sometimes the best way to stop an animal is to break its spirit before the fight even starts. He locks the creature in such an intense stare that it backs off and flees. The girl he saves introduces herself excitedly as Robina, a halfling performer who travels from place to place singing, while her companion is Tonio, a merchant. Meneldor finds out they were also headed to Whitesail, but their guards ditched them the moment trouble showed up. Seeing a good opportunity, he offers them protection along the way in exchange for help getting cheaper supplies for the village. They happily agree, and the group sets off together. Along the way, Robina draws crowds with her music. Tonio sells his goods, and Will helps out by healing people, which spreads Gracefield's name and brings in even more customers. One afternoon, while resting in an abandoned barn, Robina performs a song about Blood, Mary, and Gus. Will is instantly mesmerized because he's hearing his own family's legend from someone else's lips. The song tells the story of a time before the 3 of them became legends, when they rescued a half-elf girl who'd been chosen as an offering because a wyvern was terrorizing her hometown. The girl's beloved had almost nothing to his name, but he still offered everything he had, begging for help. They accepted, killed the wyvern, and afterward even gave the young couple money and a dagger to help them start over. When the 2 of them hesitated to accept such generosity, Gus waved it off, saying it was just an investment and that one day he'd come back to collect the debt with interest. To prove he was serious, he even gave them his real name. When the song ends, Robina explains that an elderly half-elf woman from Count Dagger's family is still waiting for that wandering sage to return. Hearing that moves Will deeply, and he silently hopes to meet her one day. The next morning, they finally arrive at Whitesail, and the city leaves Will speechless. Tonio explains it's ruled by Crown Prince Ethelbald. Everywhere he looks, Will finds something new to marvel at, from the modern city planning and trade systems to the magic street lamps and the bathhouses run by spellcasters. After enjoying the baths and eating with the others, Will heads alone to the great temple to offer prayers to Gracefield. Inside, he talks to a young priest and explains why he's there. The priest says that since Gracefield doesn't have many followers, the temple has to be careful. They can't risk having followers of dark gods sneak in disguised as priests of another faith. Because of that, anyone claiming to serve a lesser-known god usually has to go through a screening process first. Will accepts that and is about to step back, but then Bishop Bagley shows up. Bagley is gruff, sharp-tongued, and clearly strikes fear into the lower-ranking priests. But after hearing what kind of teachings Will follows, he decides to let him through without any formal testing. Will is then taken to the chapel. The younger priest complains about Bagley the whole way there, calling him corrupt and unpleasant. When Will gets back to the inn, his own companions trash-talk Bagley too, saying he's rude and usually gets what he wants through threats or bribes. But before the conversation can go any further, the emergency bell starts ringing. Will looks outside and sees panic spreading through the city because a wyvern has shown up. The temple quickly fills with the wounded, and Will rushes to the rooftop to see what's going on. From up there, he watches the city burn while soldiers try to take down the wyvern with massive war machines. It doesn't work. The beast is too fast, too powerful, and tears through their defenses with ease. Watching the destruction unfold makes Will lose it, and he hurls a lightning bolt at the wyvern in a rage, but misses. When he goes for another one, Meneldor stops him and tells him to think instead of acting like a maniac. That snaps Will back to his senses. He starts planning things out properly. He asks Meneldor for backup with long-range wind magic and combines it with his own electrified web spell. The combo shocks and traps the wyvern for a moment, but the creature breaks free and comes back even angrier. It dives straight at the temple. Will then calls on Gracefield's power and raises a massive barrier around himself. The shield blocks the wyvern's flames, but when the monster slashes it with claws covered in miasma, the barrier shatters. Meneldor then knocks the wyvern down with wind magic, and Will chains it in place. Even so, it tears itself free. Will charges in and wounds it, but the beast still won't go down, and gets ready to attack again. Will remembers Blood's words. Sometimes brute force is the last answer you've got left. So he throws himself onto the wyvern, grabs it by the neck, slams it into the ground, and keeps pushing until its neck snaps. When the fight's over, everyone around the temple stares at him in disbelief. Then Robina and Tonio start cheering loudly, calling him the Wyvern Slayer and the city's new hero. And soon the rest of the crowd joins in. Later, while helping clear away the rubble, Will is told the prince wants to see him. He and Meneldor are brought before Crown Prince Ethelbald, who asks about the group that took down the wyvern. At first, Ethelbald assumes the work was split between a bunch of specialists, but he's shocked when Will explains that he handled most of the roles himself, while Meneldor backed him up with fey magic. After hearing the whole story, the prince thanks him and offers a reward. Will says what he wants most is help dealing with the demons down south, but Ethelbald says he can't spare royal troops for a mission that far away. So Will boldly asks for permission and support to form his own combat force. That request is so over the top that the prince warns he could be punished just for asking. Even so, Will doesn't back down. He explains plainly that, as a priest of Gracefield, it's his duty to go wherever suffering exists and confront the darkness there. Ethelbald is impressed by how seriously Will takes that role. At that moment, Bishop Bagley bursts into the room, furious that the prince summoned a priest without the temple's approval. But when he hears Will's request, even Bagley is thrown off. Ethelbald then announces he wants to appoint Will as a paladin, with authority shared between the crown and the temple. Bagley is stunned and pulls Will aside for a private talk. Meanwhile, Meneldor butts heads with Bagley, while Anna, Bagley's adopted daughter, quietly tells Will that, despite his attitude, Bagley is actually a decent man deep down. Later, Bagley opens up to Will and explains why he almost never uses divine power. He says the work he does often calls for ugly methods, bribery, pressure, compromises, to protect and grow the realm. Because of that, he doesn't want to drag a god's blessing into that kind of dirty work. Hearing that completely changes Will's opinion of him. Bagley still tries to talk him out of going after the demons in Beastwoods, but Will refuses to break the oath he made. In the end, Bagley's impressed by his resolve and gives him his blessing. Afterward, Will heads to a tavern to look for fighters. He's hoping to gather adventurers who care more about honor and glory than money. Since his name's already spread after the Wyvern battle, plenty of people come to hear him out. But most lose interest once they realize the job doesn't pay well. Then a grizzled veteran named Raystoff steps onto the scene. He quickly figures out that Will's looking for fearless people willing to risk everything for pride. When he hears the goal is to crush the demons down south, he decides it sounds worth it and joins up with his own crew. Shortly after, Will is formally knighted by the prince and becomes a paladin, swearing himself to the gods and to protecting the helpless. After that, Will sets out with a rowdy crew of tough guys and starts rebuilding the region. Tonio helps fund the village's growth, and Bagley sends priests too, including Anna. Over the following months, Will and his crew patrol the forests, wipe out demonic threats, settle local disputes, and help neighboring communities become more stable. Then Raystoff reports that a scouting team has been missing for way too long. Will heads out immediately to investigate, along with Meneldor, Raystoff, and the others. They find the scouts dead and spot tracks from some massive creature. They also notice signs that someone might have fled deeper into a valley, so they follow that trail. Turns out it's a trap. Demonic beasts surround them from every direction. The group falls into formation right away, with Will and Meneldor buffing everyone with support magic. While the team fights off the beasts, a much more dangerous monster swoops down from above. Meneldor identifies it as a chimera and strikes first, but the creature shoves him aside with ease and wounds him badly. Then it scorches him with black flames. Will panics and tries to fire off a lightning bolt to save him, but a snake-like creature intercepts the spell, bouncing it right back at Will himself. That shock pushes Will past his breaking point. In a rage, he kills the snake with Vindalfur and tears through the enemies without a single thought for defense. Since the demonic sword restores his health every time it wounds an enemy, he keeps going in a frenzy until the battlefield is completely cleared out. It's Raystoff who snaps him out of it, reminding him that Meneldor is still alive. Will rushes over to him, heals him while crying, and then collapses from exhaustion. Back at the village, Will learns the Chimera got away, and the group had no choice but to retreat. Meneldor survived, but he's still unconscious, and Raystoff won't let Will visit him just yet. While he rests, Will can't stop replaying what went wrong. Later, when he finally heals Meneldor, he realizes he'd been expecting too much from the people around him. Because he himself was so strong, he'd started assuming everyone else could keep up at the same level. Deep down, he wanted companions like Mary, Blood, and Gus, and he'd quietly been projecting that expectation onto Meneldor. Racked with guilt, Will decides he needs to stop relying on other people and just handle everything on his own. But the moment Meneldor wakes up, he goes after Will and confronts him in the forest. Will tells him he's going to handle the demons on his own and doesn't need anyone else anymore. Meneldor gets furious and attacks him, but Will barely fights back. Even after Will wounds him, Meneldor refuses to stop. He forces Will to defend himself and then calls him out directly. A real friend has a duty to stop someone from making a stupid decision out of pure pain. That finally gets through to Will. He apologizes and the two of them make up. After that, they prepare properly for a second showdown with the Chimera. This time, the whole group goes in with an actual plan. They cut through the enemies with teamwork, shields, spears, and flaming arrows. Then Will and Meneldor reach an abandoned monastery ahead of the rest. At first, it seems quiet, but Will senses something's off and casts a dispel spell, which reveals the truth. The Chimera had been right in front of them the whole time, hidden behind an invisibility spell. They also discover this Chimera isn't some mindless beast. It's an intelligent monster created through demonic rituals, and its job is to keep the South in ruins, so humans never settle there again. If the land stays empty, the demons could one day reclaim the city of the dead and free the Supreme King. The fight kicks off with the Chimera striking first, but Will dodges and wounds one of its heads. From there, he and Meneldor work together seamlessly. Will keeps up the close-range pressure while Meneldor provides ranged support. They throw off the monster's coordination, rip its tail clean off, and cut down one of its heads. The Chimera then unleashes a cloud of black miasma, becoming even more dangerous. Will tells Meneldor to fall back and support him while he takes the creature head-on alone, counting on his own resistance to poison. He just powers straight through the Chimera's attacks. Meneldor launches it into the air with wind magic, and Will lands the final flurry of strikes that finishes it off. When they get ready to head into the monastery and face the main demon, they find out Rastov had already taken care of it while they were busy fighting outside. After the victory, the village's mood lifts, and Meneldor points out that more people are likely to move there now that the danger's gone. He also tells Will he's the obvious choice to become the ruler of Beastwoods. He's got a divine blessing, backing from both the prince and the church, and the trust of the people. Will feels overwhelmed at first, but then accepts that he can pull it off with his friend's help. He also starts dreaming about restoring the city of the dead and visiting his parents' graves again. It doesn't take long before Will officially becomes the Lord of Beastwoods. 2 years later, the region has changed massively under his leadership. Now 17, he lives in Torchport, a growing capital built right where that first abandoned city used to stand. One day, while going over documents related to a new papermaking method, Meneldor stops by for a visit. As they walk through the city, Will explains that paper is going to be the region's future. Instead of relying only on lumber, he wants Beastwoods to build long-term prosperity through a paper industry. When winter rolls around, Will spends some time with Robina, and she asks him to take her to the Mage Academy, a place she's always wanted to visit. The academy sits in the Forbidden Land, and regular people aren't allowed in, but Will agrees to give it a shot. Robina figures someone as skilled as him can sneak the two of them in no problem. But the moment they reach the forest surrounding the academy, Will realizes the place is packed with magical barriers and traps, so he scraps that plan. Instead, he suggests they just try walking in the front door. Even getting to the entrance is tough, since the forest is enchanted to confuse outsiders. After wandering in circles for a while, Will figures out the trick and reveals the real path using magic. Along the way, he spots a warning carved into a tree, telling travelers to learn or leave. Robina gets uneasy and says they shouldn't push their luck, mentioning that even the wandering sage couldn't get into the academy on his own back when he was young. That only makes Will more curious, and they keep going. Eventually, they come across a humble-looking old man sitting by a campfire. He introduces himself as nothing more than a lowly caretaker and says he's not important enough to give his name to a paladin. He lets them rest, offers some cheese to roast, and explains that usually only mages are allowed inside, though he figures they might still get permission. While they eat, he asks Will to show him a little magic. Will declines, explaining that his teacher taught him never to use magic just for show. The old man then asks for help drying some wet firewood. Instead of using flashy magic, Will simply arranges the wood so the nearby fire can dry it out naturally. The old man is impressed and starts asking Will and Robina what they think magic should be used for. Robina says it should be used to bring happiness and help people, and that's exactly how she's always seen Will use it. That answer seems to satisfy the old man. A blinding light flashes, and when it fades, Will realizes they're now standing right in front of the academy's gates. The humble caretaker isn't humble at all anymore. Now well-dressed and dignified, he reveals himself as Professor Hiram, a teacher at the academy and guardian of the forest. He lets them in as a special exception and asks Robina what she wants to see. Hiram guides them through the academy and takes them straight to the library, since that was the place Robina wanted to visit most. She thanks him, and he gives them permission to read anything at that level. Robina starts searching right away, and quickly picks out two massive books, leaving Will to carry them. One turns out to be a record of students who graduated from the academy, while the other covers the history of the surrounding region. She spends hours reading closely, and when night falls, the two of them head out and thank Hiram once more. On the way back, Will asks why those books mattered so much to her. Robina tells him that she once traveled with a kind, beautiful sorceress, and those days were some of the happiest of her life. But eventually they had to part ways, since they were headed in different directions. Later on, Robina found out her friend died protecting a city from demons. The sad part is that no story about her final act survived. That's why Robina wanted to dig through the records. She wants to learn about her friend's last great deed and turn it into a song, so she won't fade from memory. She says stories about heroes give people courage, and that's why she wants to make one for her. Will says he wants to hear it once she's done, and quietly hopes that maybe, even after he's gone, a song about him will live on in the world too. After that, time keeps moving forward, and the seasons keep turning. Then one day, Will gets word that flowers that should only bloom in winter are suddenly showing up in summer. The prince sees this as a serious warning sign and sends Will to investigate. Will heads into the forest with Meneldor, and there they find animals slaughtered in a brutal way. Meneldor says the forest feels wrong, like something is completely out of balance. Will isn't sure what to make of it, but he trusts Meneldor enough to take it seriously. Meneldor explains that Beastwoods is governed by two ancient forest lords. Oak rules during the cold season, while Holly reigns during the warm season. Control is supposed to change hands at the solstices, but summer has already started, and Oak still seems to be in charge. Because of that, they go to find Oak, and come across an ancient tree with a face. Meneldor asks why he hasn't handed over control. Oak says Holly never responded and never accepted the transfer. Meneldor knows this is dangerous. If the wrong ruler stays in power, the entire forest could collapse. So he offers to carry the forest's authority himself and deliver it to Holly. Oak warns him that doing so could destroy his soul in less than a month, but Meneldor says he'll sort things out with Will before that happens. He says he can't just stand by while the forest dies. Oak accepts that answer and tells him he must pass a trial to prove he's worthy. Will isn't allowed to interfere, so he has no choice but to stay behind and wait. A few days later, Meneldor comes back looking exhausted but triumphant, the mark of authority now on his hand. After that, the two of them set out to find Holly. Along the way, they run into two demons guarding the passage. Each of them takes down their own without much trouble, and they realize those enemies were only there to slow them down. Beyond a massive stone gate, they find another giant tree covered in strange mist. Meneldor recognizes it as Holly, but before they can get close, a demon general appears and blocks their path. He already knows exactly who they are, and brags that killing the distant paladin and Meneldor of the Swift Wings will make his name famous. Then he unleashes his demonic beasts on them. As the beasts close in, Meneldor reaches Holly and transfers the forest's authority to him. The instant Holly regains his power, he uses his roots to grab the beasts and drag them into the earth. The demon general is furious, but barely has time to react before Will is already on top of him. The demon starts casting a spell, but Will disrupts it, making the magic blow up right in his face. Then Will overwhelms him in close combat and finishes the fight by taking him down. With the enemy eliminated, Holly thanks them for saving him and the forest. He uses his restored power to heal the land, and the change happens instantly. New leaves sprout, and water flows back into the lakes. Then Holly drops something that shocks them both. Because Meneldor carried the forest's authority, the Fey blood inside him has awakened. One day he could become a forest lord himself and turn into a being like Holly. Neither of them had ever imagined that. Holly says it won't happen right away, and that Meneldor still has the right to reject that path, but tells him to think it over carefully. After that, Holly gives Will a warning. He says that in the rusted mountains to the west, a disaster of black fire is about to begin, and it could spread far enough to swallow the entire land. He describes the place as a demonic stronghold, and warns Will about a lord of hellfire and miasma sleeping there among stolen treasures. He tells him to get ready. Later, Will and Meneldor go to meet with Prince Ethelbald. The prince tries to praise Will for solving the forest problem, but Meneldor sees right through the diplomatic compliment and pushes for better rewards. Then Bishop Bagley rushes in, and the four of them sit down together. Will and Meneldor explain everything they discovered, including Holly's warning. Ethelbald looks worn out just hearing that another disaster might be on the way, while Meneldor and Bagley start arguing over whether a prophecy from a forest lord should even be taken seriously. Then Bagley explains that the Rusted Mountains used to be the heart of the Dwarven Kingdom before the demons took it over, and they're still there. Will actually likes hearing that, since it means there's no innocent people trapped there to worry about during the fight. The prince finds that reaction amusing, and is glad Will's willing to take on the job, but Bagley and Meneldor are a lot less impressed. Ethelbald tells Will to gather proper intel on the Rusted Mountains before making any moves. So Will and Meneldor go to Robina to ask what she knows. She explains that 200 years ago, the place was called the Iron Mountains and was the heart of the dwarves' Iron Country. When the demons invaded, the dwarves fought with everything they had, but almost all of them died. The mountains were soaked in blood, and over time they turned red as the iron rusted away. The survivors went through hell, and only a small number of them are still around. That's all Robina can tell them, since almost no songs or old stories from that land have survived. After hearing that, Will decides to talk directly with the dwarves living in Torchport. Meneldor takes him there through a forest shortcut he can use thanks to the authority he carried, cutting what would normally be days of travel down to just a few hours. Along the way, Meneldor explains that those born from Fey and human blood eventually have to choose their future. They can stay mortal and die after a long life, or choose immortality and become part of nature. Meneldor says he's not ready to decide yet. He wants to see more of what Will's going to build first. As soon as they get to the city, they ask Tonio about the dwarf refugees who arrived a few months earlier. Tonio says that when they first showed up, they looked completely hollowed out, broken inside. Most people didn't want them around, but by now they've settled in, and their leader might know something useful about the Rusted Mountains. While Will thinks about meeting them, he remembers something Gus once taught him about the Fae. Some stay close to nature, like the Forest Lords, while others choose mortal form and live among people. Those who followed the goddess of wind and forest became elves, while those who followed the god of fire and creation became dwarves. Dwarves were known as master craftsmen and fearless warriors. Even blood respected them. The next morning, while Will trains with Meneldor, he notices someone spying on them from hiding. He goes over to greet the stranger, expecting to find the bold, proud kind of dwarf he's always heard about. Instead, he finds a nervous little dwarf who bolts the second Meneldor calls him trash. Later, Will visits the part of the city where the dwarves live. Everyone's busy working, but the moment they notice him, they stop and show respect. He goes to meet Agnar, the dwarves' leader, and Grinder, Agnar's elderly uncle. Over tea, Will asks why they chose to come to Beastwoods. Grinder suddenly says they only came here to die, which catches Will completely off guard. Agnar quickly explains that Grinder is one of the few people still alive who lived through the fall of the Iron Mountains, and that pain has stuck with him ever since. Grinder then starts talking about the past. He remembers how proud and glorious his homeland used to be, and admits he's always wished he could one day take it back. But he's old now, and that dream is out of his reach. All he wants now is a peaceful future for the younger dwarves. So he asks Will to protect them. Will takes his hands and promises he'll keep them safe. Then Grinder tells the old story. 2 centuries ago, the dwarves were ruled by a king who was both brilliant and powerful. Under him, the Iron Kingdom thrived. But one day, the Supreme King sent demons to demand the dwarves surrender. The king responded by killing the messenger, making it crystal clear he'd never bow down. In response, the enemy vowed that an evil dragon would come and destroy everything. The king prepared for war, fully aware that anyone who stayed behind would likely die. He didn't force anyone to remain. The warriors chose to fight of their own will, while those who couldn't fight were ordered to flee, survive, and live long enough to one day reclaim their home. Grinder explains that back then, he was just a young guard. So instead of fighting, he was sent to guide civilians through the mountains. Many died along the way, and he's carried that guilt ever since. After leaving the dwarves' quarter, Will later comes across a tavern brawl. 2 drunks are causing trouble, and the shy dwarf who'd been spying on him earlier is trying to stop them. Instead, the drunks turn on him and knock him down. Will steps in, chases the men off, and saves the dwarf. When the kid comes to, he introduces himself as Lou. Will tells him he showed real courage by trying to help. The barkeep explains that her father usually runs the place, but he's sick, so she's been trying to manage on her own. Since dealing with rowdy customers is tough for her, Will offers to heal her father. In exchange, she gives him dinner on the house. Shortly after, Will notices Lou has already fixed the broken door. Everyone's impressed by his skill, but Lou clearly lacks confidence in himself. Later, Lou reveals why. He tells Will he's actually a dwarf prince, and that because he was raised way too sheltered, he grew up feeling weak and useless. He also admits he's admired Will for a long time. Will encourages him, telling him he's braver than he thinks. Lou then asks Will to train him into a real warrior. That night, Will takes him back to the dwarves' quarter. Everyone's frantic with worry and immediately scolds Lou for going off on his own. Will apologizes for keeping their prince occupied, but then a veteran dwarf named Gillis steps forward and asks what his intentions are. Will says he wants Lou as his attendant. The dwarves are horrified, since that would put the prince in danger. But Will tells Lou the choice is his and his alone. This time, Lou stands his ground. He says he's tired of being protected and wants to live as a real dwarven warrior. He kneels and offers his loyalty. Will accepts, and Gillis backs Lu's decision, saying every man has the right to choose his own path. From that moment on, Lu officially joins Will's crew. Will immediately makes sure Lu gets proper pay, gear, and support. Training starts the very next day. Lu struggles to keep up running because of his short legs, but he refuses to give up. Strength training comes next, and later Will introduces him to Meneldor. Lu gets nervous around him, but Meneldor apologizes for being rude before and smooths things over. Training continues, and Lu gradually gets better. During grappling practice, Will tosses him to the ground with ease. But instead of getting discouraged, Lu gets excited and wants to learn the technique. Around this same time, Will gets a message from the bishop confirming that the dragon in the Rusted Mountains is the ancient dragon Valasurka. That name ties together every warning Will's heard so far, and just thinking about it leaves him uneasy. Ancient dragons are legendary creatures said to rank just below the gods themselves in power. Even so, life goes on. Lu trains with Meneldor too, and bit by bit he gets more capable. One day, Will watches them train and notices Lu keeps hesitating every time he has an opening to attack. Meneldor keeps needling him relentlessly until Lu finally stops holding back and lands a solid hit. Will's impressed both by Lu's progress and by Meneldor's teaching style. Later, while they're eating, Lu opens up more about his past. His parents were royalty, but they died when he was a kid. And after that, the clan elders kept him way too sheltered. He never felt like that was the right way for a dwarf to live. It was around that time he first heard the story of the distant paladin, and he's been a fan of Will's ever since. Serving under him feels like a dream come true. Lu asks Will to teach him courage, but Will answers honestly. He says he doesn't think of himself as especially brave, because in every battle he's fought, he always believed he was stronger and could win. Time goes by, fall arrives, and the harvest is good. Nothing strange seems to be happening in the Rusted Mountains yet, and Lu keeps improving. Then one day, right after Lu manages to throw Will to the ground using one of Will's own moves, Anna comes running in with a report that undead have shown up in the forest. Will decides to investigate himself and brings Lu along. They travel west to a place called Pillar Hill. As soon as they arrive, a strange mist surrounds them, and Will senses magic in the area. They soon find a field of eerie wooden posts. Lu spots what looks like a hooded figure and freezes in fear. But when Will gets closer, he realizes it's just a scarecrow, built to scare off grave robbers. Will then offers a prayer for the people buried there, and Lu joins him. Lu asks if the undead came from the graves, but Will explains that people who are properly buried don't become undead. That usually only happens to the unburied, or to souls with extremely strong attachments. He also says that, in his own twisted way, Stagnate might genuinely believe he's showing mercy by refusing to let people die. Lu's surprised by how much Will knows about that god, and Will realizes he might have said too much. At first, they figure the undead sighting might have just been a mistake caused by the fog, but on the way back, they discover a hidden entrance and decide to check it out. Inside, there's a deep tunnel. Will lights up his spear, hands Lu a torch, and the two of them push forward until they reach a chamber full of graves. Suddenly, a terrifying presence fills the place. Will spots a crow wrapped in an unearthly aura and instantly knows who it is. It's Stagnate. The crow greets him casually, and Will braces for a fight. But Stagnate says he hasn't come as an echo this time. He says he's only here as a messenger. After what happened last time, he doesn't have enough power to send another echo into the world for years. Will realizes the undead rumors were just bait to lure him here. Even stranger, Stagnate says he didn't come for revenge. Before delivering his message, he even apologizes for the last echo's behavior, calling it childish. Lu can hardly believe it. Then Stagnate finally reveals why he came. He shows Will a vision of a black dragon, and what Will sees is so horrifying that he drops to his knees in fear. Stagnate warns him that he'll soon have to face Valasurka, and that if he fights the dragon now, he'll die. He even tells Will to go ask Gracefield if he doesn't believe him. When Will asks why he'd say any of this, Stagnate explains that he actually has a soft spot for humans, especially heroes, and doesn't like seeing pointless deaths. Then he reveals the dragon's backstory. During the War of the Gods, Valasurka fought as a mercenary, driven purely by greed, violence, and the thrill of battle. Even after the gods left the world, she stayed behind. Her last major battle was fighting for the Supreme King against the dwarves of the Iron Mountains. She destroyed their homeland but was wounded badly enough that it put her into a sleep that lasted 200 years. Lu is stunned and asks about his ancestors. Stagnate tells him the last dwarf king wasn't just some ordinary ruler. He was a true hero who actually managed to gouge out one of the dragon's eyes. Will is shocked by how strangely generous Stagnate is being. Then Stagnate leaves him with one last thought. One day Will might even surpass that dwarf king and kill the dragon. But that day hasn't come yet. Suddenly the ground starts shaking. Stagnate recognizes it instantly. The dragon has opened its eyes. He tells Will to get out, right now. Will and Lu rush back to Pillar Hill, only to find the place already swarming with demons. They fight together through the horde, with Will shielding Lou whenever the fighting gets too dangerous for him. After the last demon falls, another roar echoes through the air. Stagnate explains that the dragon's roar can terrify nearby creatures so intensely that they lose their minds. That's why the demons were acting so violently. Then he warns that something else is coming. From the sound of the footsteps, Will realizes it's a giant. A massive forest giant charges in, raging, driven mad with fear. Instead of trying to kill it, Will decides to take it down without causing any permanent harm. He steps into the attack's path, throws it off balance, and slams it to the ground. Once the giant is unconscious, he uses his blessing to restore the creature's senses. When the giant wakes up, it thanks Will. Will answers in the giant's language and learns that it plans to warn its tribe and lead them away from the danger. Stagnate approves of that choice, but still says the same thing. Will isn't ready for the dragon. He argues that the smarter move would be to live, train, and come back later, instead of throwing everything away now. Then he disappears. When Will and Lou get back, they find the city already suffering from the dragon's influence. Beasts have gone berserk. Destruction is everywhere, and dealing with the aftermath takes time, manpower, and a ton of effort. Shortly after, Will receives a letter from the bishop. It says powerful demons are on the move alongside the dragon and reminds him that retreating isn't the same as cowardice. That only deepens his doubts. He prays to Gracefield, begging for guidance, for comfort, for any sign at all, but nothing comes. While he's still wrestling with that silence, Menildor tells him there's a crowd outside. A group of dwarves has gathered at the door, wanting to know if Will plans to face the dragon. Lou tries to calm them down, but the older dwarves are too worked up to listen. One of them shoves forward and Lou throws him to the ground. Then Lou loses it. He tells them they're too weak to even beat him, so they have no business talking about facing a dragon. Grinder says he doesn't care. He says they've lived too long carrying shame, and he'd rather die as a true dwarven warrior. That sends Lou completely over the edge. He knocks Grinder down too, then takes on the others as they come at him. After that, he shouts that they're not even thinking about winning. They just want a dramatic death, and he refuses to let them throw themselves away like that. Then he swears, as a blood descendant of the last dwarf king, that when the time comes, he'll join the battle himself. That speech changes everything. The older dwarves are stunned, and Will sees just how much Lou has grown. Will then steps forward and makes his decision public. He says he's going after the dragon. Menildor and Lou immediately say they're coming too. Others volunteer as well, including Rastov. Will knows full well how bad the odds are, but his companions have already made up their minds, so he tells everyone to get ready. As the mission takes shape, Rubina laughingly calls dibs on the rights to the story of Will's fight against the dragon, so she can turn it into a song. Will promises she'll hear the story straight from him first. Tonio arrives with supplies, and Will quietly asks him for one more favor. That night, Gracefield appears to Will in a dream. She says clearly that she doesn't want him to die, but Will still refuses to back down, saying his oath won't let him ignore an evil this great. In the end, Gracefield blesses him and tells him to go. Will swears he'll come back victorious. The next day, the group leaves Torchport by boat as the city sends them off, but the route everyone expects isn't the real one. Will reveals that Rastov's group will take the obvious path and act as bait, while he and the others sneak in through a different entrance using a second boat that Tonio secretly prepared. This hidden route passes through the city of the dead, where the Supreme King remains sealed and undead still roam the place. At that moment, Will finally reveals the truth, that he was raised there. He tells them the 3 legendary heroes raised him, and that he once faced Stagnate's echo in that very city. Menildor is annoyed that he's only finding all this out now. By morning, they arrive at the city of the dead, blanketed in thick fog. Will explains the fog is Gus's magic, made to keep outsiders away. But since he knows Gus so well, he can read the spell and guide the group right through it. The moment they land, the memories hit him hard. He stops first at his parents' graves, then runs straight to the temple to find Gus. At first there's no answer, and Will worries he's arrived too late. Then Gus suddenly pops out and scares him on purpose. Real cute. Will feels a huge wave of relief seeing him, though Gus immediately asks if Will's finally gotten rich. Will says he's become both a famous paladin and the ruler of Beastwoods. Gus is impressed for a second, then immediately starts ribbing him about the fact that he still doesn't have a girlfriend. Afterward, Will introduces his companions to Gus and tells him the real reason they came. They're going to challenge the dragon. Gus reacts exactly as expected. He calls the plan idiotic and says they're nowhere near strong enough. He even jokes that they don't have enough money to just buy the dragon off, which makes it painfully obvious where Will got his money habits from. But after all the yelling, Gus offers one serious piece of advice. Stop acting like there's only one way to win. Later, Will talks to him privately and asks what he knows about the dragon. Gus says its body is insanely tough, Its magic is overwhelming, and it's both fast and lethal in close combat. The only real hope is landing hits on the old wounds it took a long time ago. That warning makes Will understand even more clearly why Stagnate tried to stop him. Even so, Will says he can't back down. If he walks away, too many innocent people will die. So Gus finally agrees to help. He leads the group to a hidden underground vault where the weapons and armor once used by the great heroes are still stored. Each of them picks something out. Will grabs a massive shield, hoping it'll help him survive the dragon's fire. Meneldor claims a legendary bow. Lou picks out a heavy halberd. Rastov keeps his own sword, but asks Gus to enchant it. Standing in that armory, surrounded by relics of the past, Will silently thanks the heroes who came before him. Then he gets ready, knowing the fight ahead of him is unlike anything he's ever faced. And that's it for today. If you're into anime recaps like this one, drop a comment below. I read every single one. Also, make sure to check out this other video right here. You're gonna love it. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.